live. Hey everybody, welcome to Gamefest 2019, here a part of Starfest in Denver, Colorado, and you are joining us live from the comfort of your phone, home, car, hopefully you're not driving, and we are going to be hosting here the game design panel here at Gamefest, and I'm Robert. I'm one of the volunteers at Petrie's Family Games that is powering Gamefest this year, and so I would like to make introductions. To my right, your left, first we have Mark Streed from Dice Tower. He's been dissecting games since 2004 and board game reviewer slash previewer for the Dice Tower since 2014. To his right, we have Mr. Sean Brown from Mr. B Games, designer and publisher since 2005. I love.
Sound old.
No.
Like 2015.
No. I have Helionox, so I love that game.
It's so good.
To his right, we have Peter Ridgeway from Samian Games. He's been designing since 2012, correct?
That's right.
Past 7 years. Moving on down, we have Todd Gardiner from Chaosium Inc. He's been an avid gamer and graphic designer, but more recently the director of organized play.
That's right, I do some cat herding of GMs.
Yes. And then following Todd, we have Keith, is it Avallone?
Avallone, yes.
Keith Avallone and his son Sam from PLAAY Inc. Keith is a designer and publisher of sports board games since 2000, but you're going to be releasing your first non-sports themed game later this year.
Correct.
And his son Sam, who is an avid video and board gamer about to graduate CU.
That's correct.
With a degree in digital animation, right?
That's also correct, yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So, panel members, feel free to ask any questions that might arise based on our discussion. We're going to be talking about all things design, publishing, social media, stuff like that. So let's kind of break the ice. And anyone can answer if you feel you want to. This is not a regiment thing. This is here to have fun. And JD, we love to have fun, don't we?
We do.
We do. So first up, back in the day, did you ever imagine you would be working in your hobby?
Yeah, not even remotely. No way. And if you told me 5 years ago I'd be on a panel or in front of thousands of people or thousands of people watching my videos, I'd be like, no. It's just amazing that I'm doing this, and I feel super lucky to be part of this community and hobby. It's amazing. I love doing stuff for the Dice Tower. I love interacting with publishers and designers. It's fantastic.
I think that in retrospect, going back and looking at my obsession throughout high school, college, and beyond, that it's inevitable that I would have ended up doing something. I've been creating content for my own games. I've been poking around at board game designs or making home game house rules. So something's been happening in the way of game design, and the fact that it finally connected to get an outlet where I'm now editing convention scenarios and writing content for Chaosium. That was going to happen.
Awesome. Anybody else? I mean,
me?
Sam, you're the young one there.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, back in the days, like last year. Yeah, no, I kind of, as I was getting close to the end of my degree, I started looking for job opportunities. I'm thinking, okay, 3D animation, what am I going to do with this? But right around that time, started to see some openings with Keith, my dad's games, and some non-sports games, and the business is starting to get to the point where, okay, maybe it's time for some updated graphics and that sort of thing. And so I thought, this is something I love doing and something I could see myself doing. So now I'm taking my 3D animation and more just so art and general skills and applying that to games. So, yeah, I guess I could see myself doing this a year ago to answer the question.
So how many of you is gaming, the gaming industry, by show of hands, is your full-time job? Okay, so for Peter, right?
Yes.
And Todd, this is...
So I also supplement Chaosium, which is between half and three-quarter time, with event production, video production, and event photography. which was what I was doing before Chaosium. It's kind of tough to just let go of the video production bug.
Gotcha.
So I still do some Kickstarter videos, some one-man band TV commercials, and narrative shorts in the Seattle area. Because why else have a film degree if you're not going to use it?
Right.
So they actually allow me the flexibility around the convention cycle to be able to continue to do that. So they're quite happy to help me still be creative in other ways, which is great.
Yeah, I'm more of a weekend game designer. As an independent game designer, it's really hard to make a living at it. I mean, you do it because you love it. It's in your blood. You can't imagine doing anything else. But it doesn't pay the bills at this point yet. So maybe one of these days.
Gotcha. And you know, Peter, Sandra from our broadcasting booth back in Colorado Springs, she just says, just speak up a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sandra.
To everyone.
So we all have stories about what got us into gaming, but what particularly keeps you excited about gaming to keep doing this?
Well, I mix it up. When I go to conventions 10 or 11 times a year, I run a ton of role-playing games. On top of that, I have one home game that plays twice monthly. But what I switch it up with is I do a weekly board game night. Every single week, Tuesday night, get together with my friends, stay that connection with those friends, but also go through all the new board games and get that continuing variety, but also that big switch up from what I'm doing professionally in role-playing games. So that keeps me obsessed, but also fresh.
What about anyone else?
I tell myself I'll keep doing this as long as it's fun. And seriously, every game that I make, I say, this could be the last one. I don't know if I want to keep doing that. And then as soon as that one's over, I get another idea and get excited about it and keep going. I just can't seem to stop. So
I think the thing that's exciting to me is the tools that are available for a game designer now that weren't available even 5 years ago, and the opportunities to, you know, promote and spread the word about your games through social media. And I mean, just it's amazing to be able to, the kind of stuff you're able to put together now that is like, you know, back in the day, you know, it would have taken somebody with a professional background in graphic design to do, and now, you know, much of that is pretty much available to the layman. So it's very rewarding to be able to take an idea and really make it look great, and really, you know, be able to do something with it just because the tools are so good right now, and then be able to promote it through, you know, Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and reach people. I mean, that to me is what makes it really exciting. The games have always been exciting, but the thing that's specifically exciting now is the tools that are available.
Can I add to that by saying it's also a great era for artists who have, or designers, but artists to be able to showcase their work on DeviantArt and a bunch of other venues, so that game companies who are looking for that internal art style can go shopping on the internet to see which kind of artist is going to work for them. We found, I'm sure, a quarter of our artists through that, and another quarter through referral, and other half through legacy of being with us forever, which is how the Call of Cthulhu books and the RuneQuest books keep on winning like any art awards. So, because there's so many talented people out there, we get to now choose the top 5% out of a much larger pool. It's great.
What about you, Sean? What keeps you going? You're kind of quiet over there.
Yeah.
You're kind of quiet.
This is weekend.
Our viewers in Washington, D.C. is like, why isn't Sean talking? You can blame Jason for that.
Honestly, these guys are all like nailing it. I mean, every single one of them have the exact same kind of thoughts I do. I think we all go through ebbs and flows and cycles. And, you know, I mean, it's very similar. You can work on a game for a year and a half and be completely sick of it and like, oh, I got it to the printer, I never want to touch this thing again. And then you don't touch it for 6 months or 4 months while it's printed and shipped over, and then you go to a game convention and you start teaching it, demoing it, you start seeing people go, wow, this is awesome, and then you realize something that you made is entertaining people at a table, and you're like, okay, that was worth it, right? And then that's what brings me back each time.
Even though I'm not a designer, I do a lot of demos and had a chance to demo a lot of games. I find the joy when those, like you said, when those people, they get it. They're like, oh my gosh, that this is so fun you know, once you get over that rules explanation, and I can imagine this, you know, as your works are out there and you see people's faces light up, I mean, that's priceless.
Well, and sometimes you get crazy stories. You know, you'll be riding in a cab or on an airplane to a show, and you get stuck next to somebody that, you know, somebody from a different walk of life, like sitting next to a VP for Verizon, and they're asking me what I do, and I talk about making games, and I'm like, oh my god, I stare at spreadsheets, and they hate their life, right? And they're going to this thing, and I'm like, yeah, well, you know, sometimes you have to, you know.
You didn't tell them that game design is 10% spreadsheets.
Right. But you know, like, you're just like, well, cool, you're riding in first class, and I got, you know, bumped up because they had no other seat. Like, you know, you're like talking about the difference, like, you know, it's you know, because we're on a budget and they're not, right? And they sometimes ask you a game you make and you say something and then like their eyes are like, oh, I play that game all the time, and you just like, you realize people are people everywhere and we all do the same stuff. And it's, you know, it's just different walks. But that's what I like, is all the different people you meet, you know, even down from a cab ride to Gen Con, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
What are some of your favorite categories or families of game, whether to play or design? Not mechanics, just categories or families.
Shall we just go down the line?
Yeah, I'm all about big, thematic, story-driven games. That's what I just eat that stuff up. I'm looking for the game, much like in the video game industry, where you jump in, you start playing, and suddenly it's 3 hours and you don't even realize. That's the kind of gaming I like to do.
That's good. How do you follow that? I like games.
What kind of game?
I don't know. I don't ever, I guess, design with a genre in mind. I just get a crazy idea, and a lot of times I'll help do a lot of development work, because we'll get submitted games and I'll see them and I'll say, oh, this is a really great game. I couldn't have dreamed up this in my mind, but it's zombies yet again. and you'll go, but wow, what if we made these cloud chasers, like guys jumping from clouds to clouds? That might be cool, or something. And I'll come up with a theme, and then I'll kind of reskin it and then help the guy, where they'll come back and say, well, that will never work because we have to have this infection thing. And I'm like, why can't, you know, there be flying winged infected things, right? and we'll retheme from there. So for me, I never go in with a family or specific, I have to use roll and ride, or I have to use worker placement. I just go in with, you know, an open idea, and then it kind of just fills into place.
I really like accessible games. So, you know, to me, gaming is all about community, getting together with your friends, and bringing new people into the experience. So any game that you can teach in 5 minutes and people get it right away and can get into it, those are the kind of games I love.
Well, I have two answers, because I play a ton of board games and also do role-playing games. But for board games, we have a group of people who try to play every single Essen game right after it comes out. So we're in late October, Halloween, burning through a week of playing Essen games. And this last year at Essen, higher level Euro games, a style we call point salad, where you go to the salad bar and you get a few points from this, and a few points from that, a few points from this. It's a bunch of little small systems that possibly interconnect or have a bigger structure. So this year that would be Gugong and Tiahuanacan, City of the Gods, and a few other games I don't remember the name of. Those were my two favorite. I think that there were so many of those this last year because like Feast for Odin and Great Western Trail really showed that those could be very strong, super entertaining, very adaptable games that require the player to think about their strategies and readjust their strategies as the things in the game change. I like those little systems. I like that interlocking nature. So I'm glad that there's a ton of them out right now, because that's just for me. For role-playing games, Chaosium likes to really tell personal stories in which the characters themselves have stakes. Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder are about an elf and a paladin and a sorceress telling an epic arc story from 1st to 20th level as they cross the nation, the continent, saving villagers and townsfolk from various different problems. The eponymous joke is, of course, that they're wandering murder hobos who will never return to a place that they've saved before. But in Call of Cthulhu, we pre-generate characters that have their own story. They are the villagers who are having a kobold problem. And will they survive the supernatural encounter? Better yet, can they solve it so that no one else suffers from it? The stakes are much higher for them. In RuneQuest, we tie you into the community, so stories are driven by your clan folk, your chieftain, your peoples are having some problem, and there may be personal stakes involved in that a relative is suffering something, or you may actually suffer some social detriment if you don't solve this problem, and the stakes are personal. And that style of stories with Chaosium Inc to tell. I like that in a role. Plus, we get to kill half the characters and win it's a one. Because we don't care if the barber lives.
Right. Keith, what about you?
Well, I like story-driven games, games that are are dealing with a theme and fleshing out that theme as opposed to just an abstract game where you're moving pieces or whatever. I also like games that don't require me to. I like games that deliver an immediate payoff when I make a move. Whatever my decision is, I want to see it pay off now. I don't want to wait an hour from now and say, "Oh, that thing I did an hour ago, I'm finally benefiting from it." I guess
so sulking, with the gears, you don't like putting that worker out there and waiting 6 turns before you get what you want.
That's
6 turns, I'm going to get some
too long. I'm too impatient for that. So, I'm not saying that's that's the way majority of people play games. That's just the way my personal preference is. I don't like to sit around and wait for my strategies or my decisions to have an effect. I want them to have an effect right now.
What about you, Sam?
Yeah, kind of a little bit different than what everybody else is talking about. I'm pretty into trading card games, collectible card games. I'm really interested in the idea of like metagame, and especially an evolving metagame. So like it's the game that you're playing against your opponent, but then outside of that is also like this whole universe of other possible scenarios that could have gone on, and different decks, and you have to think about like, oh, what's going to be good against this, and this is good because it's good against this, and I don't know. I think those kind of decisions are just really interesting. So.
There's some titles out of the Magic.
Pokemon trading card game. That's my bread and butter. Favorite one. Magic is super good. Keyforge, new up and coming one.
Yeah, my son really enjoys Keyforge. When they came out, I think we jumped in like 20 decks.
Nice.
We were just, oh my goodness.
What you got to do. Yeah. But yeah.
What are some of your favorite game mechanics? So we talked about themes and overall categories. What about specific mechanics? Dice rolling, card drafting, variable player power, stuff like that.
He's a sucker for a dice chucker.
Yeah,
No.
it's so true. I was just gonna say it's all about dice for me. I love dice checkers. I love just the randomness of it. I love see what's gonna happen.
I have never met anybody that likes the randomness of dice games.
You have now.
There's 2 more on this end of that.
Oh, okay.
We are big into that.
Yeah, that's
Where
awesome,
they're just
right?
giving you random numbers to give you choices. Like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 choices based upon the number. It doesn't have to be that you have to roll high or low or even a specific number.
Like,
for example, roll for the galaxy.
yeah.
Right.
It's just about like I'm trying to get these opportunities and make the best use of them.
Yep.
So I'm in the middle on that.
I'm mechanics agnostic. It's just whatever works, right? I mean, when I start designing a game, I want to create a certain experience for people, and whatever mechanic I can use to create that experience, that's what I'm going to use. So I guess I really don't prefer any mechanic over another one.
I like worker placement stuff, like on a personal level for play, but I'm probably more like you. I don't think I ever think of a mechanic also in mind when designing, and it's more of I want to do X, Y, and what's the best way to do it. And a lot of times I do all of them. Can you do it with cards? Yes. Can you do it with dice? Yes. Can you do it this way with points or action movements? And then you try them all, and this one sucks, this one's great, this one's not so good, this one's not so good, and then it's always the 2 in the middle, the not so goods that work out. But you always find something totally wrong with one that worked great.
And you were saying earlier about abstracts, right? The thing that I would like to see is like that be something in a thematic story-driven game where it's a puzzle you have to solve in the middle of the game.
Have you seen Tijuana City of the Gods?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's you're building mechanically building a pyramid. having to match symbols to place the tiles for maximum points. That's amazing.
I love when those things feed into the overall larger game.
Yeah.
Right.
So, what game mechanics have you noticed that have always been around, but you're starting to see like a new twist to them?
Dice for sure. I mean, just like what you were saying, going from numbers to symbols to icons to, if you roll these things, you get actions. They've kind of just changed. It's just a randomization of your available actions. It's pretty clever.
Putting combos of those together.
Yeah, deck building, obviously.
Some games have actually made it dice where you can build them by changing faces.
Right. Yeah, like dice boards and stuff.
Yeah. The new Roll for the Galaxy expansion.
Yep.
You mentioned deck building, like which ones specifically?
Oh, I mean, there's so many. I mean, you know, people always think of Dominion as like the kickoff for it, but you know, in reality, it's Magic. I mean, ultimately, and then somebody, well, Donald Vaccarino basically said, "Hey, what about if we made a game about the Magic Draft?" Right? I mean, just crazy. Like you were saying down there, the metagame, right? I mean, why didn't anybody think about that? The game was actually building your deck. You know? And then from there, it was like you'd start to think about, well, how can I give this character action and this character action? You make an adventure game, you go, oh, just give them, you know, 10 cards that's basically their own little deck. And then you can make movement-based deck games, and there's just so many different combinations that opened up. But on the same sense as designers or publishers, if you hop too much on that train, whenever something really clever comes out, then there's like 100 of that same really clever thing. So I feel like sometimes it's always like an ebb and flow.
It totally is.
Yeah, there's a lot of character deck building things now. A lot of them.
Right,
So we have Gloomhaven, we have Arkham Horror Card Game.
Yep.
It's kind of saturated at that point. At this point.
So then it's time to just find the next new one.
It's true.
And it's also the new thing on social media, folks, and videos you'll see, oh, I'm tired of deck builder. Just kind of that thing at the moment until the next thing they're tired of.
Well, it feels like Roll and Write is going there.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
feels
Roll
like
and Write
it.
really has picked up in the last couple of years.
Yep.
But they're super accessible.
Yep.
They're quick, they're light, they're fun. They feel satisfying. You know, at some point we'll have 10,000 of them and you won't know what to choose.
There's an advantage in teaching people games that use core systems that people are already familiar with.
True.
So the worker placement thing has been around forever, since Puerto Rico, and it works. It totally works. And there are still dozens and dozens of fresh variants of it. But it has to be dressed up by a lot of other stuff these days, because it's just the starting point.
Yeah. Like I'm looking forward to Reavers of Midgard because it's a single worker placement, but with a follow element, like Race for the Galaxy or Roll for the Galaxy. And again, it's taking something that's out there, but just, hey, let's flip it around. Keith and Sam, anything?
Yeah, Keith and I were just listening to this super interesting podcast. I think it was a Dice Tower podcast about combining mechanics in games. So they were talking about how sort of the trend these days is take two established mechanics like deck building and worker placement, and then sort of mash those together in new and interesting ways. I think they were talking about Bloodborne or Blood Rage. Yeah, haven't played Blood Rage myself, but sounds like that's sort of guys on a board, and then also some deck building elements in it. So
Drafting.
Yeah.
When looking at or play testing an unpublished game, what kind of things do you look for that are particularly important to you?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, our cardinal rule has always been, is it fun? We
Yeah.
have fun playing
That's
this.
it, yeah.
If it's fun, then we keep working on it. If it's not fun, we pitch it.
And sometimes you play one that's really fun, and you're like, God, this is great. And you want to play it again, you play it, I'm really liking it, and you're not seeing anything wrong with it, and oh, this is going to be awesome, so we'll just find a good theme and artist, and you're really considering it, so you're about ready to make an offer, and then you show it to a couple more people just to make sure, and somebody in your group goes, oh yeah, this is Citadels. Right? Right, and they just go, but we're playing with World War II guys. And you're like, and then you have to think back in the Wayback Machine, what was it like with Citadels? And then you go back and you're like, yeah, it is. It's not even flattery, compliments, you know, that kind of thing. It's not that it borrowed from a mechanic or something, but it's literally a clone all the way across, just rethemed. And you're like, that's not gonna, like, and then you have to kind of go back to this designer and say, you've made a really cool game, but somebody else already made it. And for me, I always have to ask myself whenever I'm looking at a game to publish or even make myself, is there something out here that exists that I would rather play, right? Like when you see Keith's baseball game, it's a lot of fun, and you sit down and play it. Is there another baseball game where you go, or I could play this one, and if the answer is no, then you go, he's got a winner, you know? That's how I felt like when we got the baseball highlights when I was over at Eagle. It was not like a status pro baseball game. It was totally different. And originally people were like, oh, you know, sports games are a tough market to hit because a lot of people did them the same way. Keith does them a lot differently, which is why I think he sticks out. And so when I saw a board game version that was different and it used deck building, it was like, oh, well, that's kind of clever. And you kind of felt like you could go from there. But when you see, you know, somebody put out a map of the United States and you're putting out, you know, I don't know, cactuses and you got to collect cards and you got to get 5 of them to put your cactus between these 2 cities. I go, this is Ticket to Ride, right? It's just with cactuses, and it's a clever idea and it's a clever concept. And they go, no, but we have these cards and things, and you just go, but it's
not enough to change.
Right? Exactly. Like a couple of my artist friends used to say, when you were mimicking art or copying something that you like, you should always make a couple of changes to it because then it becomes yours and original. So I always take that into consideration in game design is, and we've all done it. I'm sure you guys have done it. Right? I've designed something, this is the greatest game ever, and then somebody's like, this is just like Arkham Horror, and you're like, oh no.
I've been real lucky because I do a lot of previews, up and coming games that are going to Kickstarter, and I work with a lot of new and older designers that have been in it for a while and are just starting. And the interesting thing is that with all the prototypes that I play, I always look for the one thing to talk about. That's something the fun. What was the thing that I had fun doing in this game? Even if the game is bad, there's always one thing that I'm like, oh yeah, this was neat though. So that's kind of what I call out in the videos. But I've also, because of that interaction with folks, I haven't designed a game from A to B, but I have a lot of input, and Sean can tell you, that I've added to games because of my unique position. And I get my name in rule books a lot because they're like, oh, thanks for the help.
Is that in our games?
Yeah.
Times I've come up to play and they're going to shoot a video and we're working with a studio or a company and the game's ready to go and they want to go print it and we play with Mark and he was like, why'd you do that? You should just do that. And you look at it and you go, cool, thanks, Mark. And then you call on the phone right after you leave and you go, hey, so we have to change this thing immediately, right? It happens. I mean, it happens to everybody. So it's cool.
I'm always looking for a wow factor, right?
Yeah,
in the games I design. There are a lot of ideas that are in my head, but I never can get really excited about them because there's no wow to it. So it just stays in my head. But when I come across that idea, I'm like, oh, that would be really cool. And then I start getting excited about it. That's when I actually start putting stuff on paper. Hopefully it translates, and after you go all through the iterations, other people say wow, but not always. That's part of the process.
I always think like Uwe Rosenberg, I'm sure everybody's thought of let's make a game about farming. That doesn't sound like it would be fun.
Right.
But Lahar's awesome. Agricola's awesome. He just dove into farming. He took something that was important to him.
Yeah, right.
And he made awesome games. And I would have never guessed in a million years that I would like moving things around and harvesting corn and plowing fields and stuff, right?
Right.
But it's super rewarding.
In your guys' opinion, what are the couple of the biggest influencers that have changed our gaming industry over the past few years?
I would say number one is social media.
Social media.
Man, 100%, because it's made people more aware, it's brought more audience in, and I mean, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing with videos and stuff without this social media. And I feel bad a lot because I had an instance from Gen Con where I'm there with Eric Lang and we're looking at Blood Rage and someone walks up and asks me to sign the box. He says, don't you want Eric to sign? He designed it. And so I never get tired of giving him a hard time about that. But I mean, the thing is that I would love to see more designers and stuff be more upfront in social media as well. And I know a lot of designers tell me, well, we don't really want to be on camera and stuff. But I think it's super important how broad that.
By upfront, what do you mean?
Just be more present with folks, oh yeah, no, this is me, that kind of stuff. And I mean, you get used to it. I mean, it took me a long time, right? Because like I said, I would never be the person in front of camera, and now I love it. So I just think it adds that. If you add that personality, you try to draw people in with what you're talking about. You know, I think that adds a lot to the game, and they're like, oh, this guy's really passionate about what he's doing.
Extrovert.
Introverts. I think Kickstarter has completely changed the game.
Oh, sure.
It's created a very low risk way to get an idea out there. You know, before you had an idea, you loved it, you're thinking, I've got to print 2,000 copies of this and stick it in my garage. And what if they just stay there? You know? It was kind of a risky thing, but now we have this opportunity that pretty much anyone with very low risk can go out there with an idea. And I think the level of creativity and everything has just gone up because of that.
So I have to admit, you guys are awesome. Because in front of that question, what did I write there, Mark? Trick question.
Yes.
Right. Because now we're going to talk about Kickstarter and social media. So you guys are like right on.
Well, I'm going to go with a new direction before we run off to the next topic.
Okay.
I think Dungeons and Dragons, as in its current incarnation, is doing an amazing thing of building the audience, that core audience of people that will sit around a table, drawn in because their friends are playing Dungeons and Dragons, or because they've heard a podcast, or because celebrities are playing it and they're aware of
on
that.
television shows.
And if people want to sit down and play a role-playing game and discover that at a table is really a fun, good time, then we become the beneficiaries of people who stick it out and continue to broaden their horizon. Somebody's got to be at the top of the market. I wish it was us, but that's never going to happen while Dungeons and Dragons is still the king of the heap, and they're great. But that allows people to come to our game at conventions and give it a go.
What are some other big influencers? Anything else?
Is there a correct answer?
No, there's
Trick question, correct answer.
So let's delve into Kickstarter a little bit. So when and what was your first Kickstarter experience? Whether it's backing a game or a project or creating one?
Well, I guess they're thinking, and I can tell a Kickstarter story or two. The original Chaosium almost went bankrupt because of two poorly managed Kickstarters, making mistakes like we're going to offer free or very low rate international shipping, thinking that will make up the difference in the profit on the book. Doing so before we've actually written the product, so you don't know the page count or the weight after you've printed it. Huge mistake. When you're new to Kickstarter, you can make those mistakes, and a lot of companies have gone under from stuff like that. Chaosium was saved because its legacy and pedigree were so important, but also because the split between the fantasy line and the board line back in the 90s allowed the fantasy line to be passed off to new people, Moon Design, who then had established themselves, and they came in and took care of Chaosium, fulfilling all the Kickstarter stuff. Moon Design structure, however, was that they would write an entire product. They would have maybe a sample item of art or two, but they would know what the weight and the shipping costs and so on was going to be before they started the Kickstarter. That is the way that you do publication Kickstarters, is you know what your over-the-line costs are going to be. And now we're at the point where we only kickstart experimental things like our board games and card game lines, where that's kind of a new area for Chaosium, and that's the kind of thing we want to kickstart because we don't know how many people are going to buy. RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, Pendragon, and all these other games, none of them are Kickstarter anymore, we just publish them. We're big kids now.
You guys been able to think about anything?
Well, if you haven't, I have a couple of online questions
Yeah,
that's
sure.
related to this.
Yes. Go ahead and read Jason's.
Yeah, Jason would like to know where you draw the line between allowing backers to influence the game and following your own personal feelings. And he has a side note, Sean, that he thought you did a great job of this in Hellenica.
Oh.
Cool.
So
So I've adopted this thing on Kickstarter like that we unofficially do. We've never really made it a thing, but I've always tell people we have an idea wall. And I literally have a white piece of paper when I do a Kickstarter, and it's on a wall. If I read something cool, I have a Sharpie and I write it on the wall. I throw it on the idea wall.
That's awesome.
And what I do is I do not discount it immediately. I don't throw it away. I don't do anything like that. And I come back and revisit it later. So throughout the campaign, I might hear 3 or 4 people say something specific. And then what I'll do is I'll go back to the idea or the plan I had and say, in this plan, is there room to work that in? And was it a good enough idea? And sometimes they get crossed out. Sometimes I'm writing them on the wall laughing, going, this isn't going to work. But I do it because the time I didn't do it was the time I got inspired by something. And sometimes it's not even that idea, it's the inspiration of the idea. So with Hellenica, I worked with a local designer here named Scott Demers. He's a good friend of mine, and he's literally been working on this game for 9 years. And so it was very established the way we wanted to do it. And so that one, there were a lot of ideas. What if you guys did this? What if you guys did this? And we're like, but we want to do this. And that was mostly driven because as a team, we were a collaborative team, and we just knew what we wanted to do on that one. But a lot of times I go into them and just go, here's my loose structure, like a script, and maybe we can get some cool feedback. But I still, when I first ever did Kickstarter, it was very like that. For me, it was very collaborative. It would be, here's this cool idea I'd have, and sometimes I'd get so many ideas from the Kickstarter itself that I would almost, I wouldn't say redesign it, but I would add so many new things to it from it. And I've seen that really go away in the last probably 4 or 5 years. That anymore, I feel like 90% of the games that go up are already predetermined, and in some cases maybe even already being printed. And that saddens me, because as a creator, I still like the process.
Well, I was gonna say something, but Sean kind of shot me down there. I was at a what was it, the World Board Game Championships in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I was talking with I won't say his name, major designer, and we're talking about Kickstarter. He says the way to do Kickstarter is to make the product first and then put it on Kickstarter when it's done. And me being risk averse and a planner, that seemed really attractive to me. So that's how we did our Kickstarter. I mean, we basically got all our things in our. We made a custom component for one of our games. We didn't do a game on Kickstarter. We had a custom component that we needed to have manufactured, and we did a Kickstarter for that. But the reality was we already had it planned. We already had the order placed, and the boat was on its way when we launched our Kickstarter. And it was a really successful Kickstarter. But I think part of that is because there were very few unknowns. We didn't have to worry about, oh gosh, we didn't think about that, this is too heavy, now we're going to have to pay all this extra shipping or whatever. So, I hear what Sean's saying, though, about lamenting it is kind of a creative drain when you do it that way. But that's how I think, that's how it works for me. I think there's, and I've said this before in past forums, that I think there are some drawbacks to Kickstarter. I think the percentage that they take is very high. And so we find it better that when we have game ideas and new products and stuff, we just do pre-orders ourselves with our own community, with our own mechanism. We just bypass Kickstarter completely. It accomplishes the same thing, but without the fees and without all the extra red tape and hassle. So.
Well, I agree with you. I think sometimes when you do your own, like P500 GT, GMT, they've been doing the P500s forever.
Yes, that's a great model.
There's also another thing when you go to them and you get a P500 game, it always felt like to me, you were pre-ordering that so they could get enough to go print it. You had no influence or say on the game.
Right.
And I think that's also a really cool model if that's your design style, right? I mean, God, I designed one a month ago, and one of the ideas was something about, I wish the track were wider or something so you could race more cars, and I thought, that'd be cool, but you could put 2 sets together and whatever. And then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, well, couldn't I make alternate versions of all the pieces that I've already made, but wider, so you could have more? And I thought, oh, that's like an expansion. It's like a whole other game, and I don't want to do that. But then, like, somebody said something about double-siding a card, and I'm like, mind blown. Oh, I can do that. And that I had no intention of ever doing, and I thought to myself, that's why I still like to have the idea wall. But there are times, like a Hellenica time, where you go, I don't want an idea wall here, right? Because it would really mess up all the balance.
One of our live viewers, Andrew, asks, can you discuss persisting through the creative process when you are either burned out or discover/realize your product is just one of 100,000 flooding the market?
I put stuff away. If I get to that point, I just set it aside, and because there's always something that's interesting to me. And I've had games that I've worked on, I worked on for a couple of years, put them away for 5 or 6 or 7 years, and then got something that sparked me to go back and dig it out and pick it up again. So that's my answer. Is yeah, because you're really not doing yourself a service by working on something you're not liking. You got to have the passion for it. You got to have the drive for it. And if you're not, that doesn't mean you've wasted your time. Just set it aside.
A lot of times I'll cannibalize portions of that earlier idea and incorporate it into a new game. Like maybe 5 years later, I'm like, oh, this game is working great now, but if I added this other element from the previous game, it'd be really something special. So you just these elements, I just keep them in a file somewhere, and I know that at some point in the future I might reuse them.
I have a convention scenario that I'm editing that needs a fix of some kind. It's got an Act 2 problem. And so I've got it set aside right now because I'm stuck on it. I just figure eventually I will have seen the right Game of Thrones episode to unlock the solution to how to make this twist work.
And as far as the point about how do you deal with the fact that your game is just one of 100,000? Well, you don't have to be everybody's favorite game. You just have to find your crowd, just find your audience. I think our company is a great example of that. We got this niche, this niche group of people that like sports simulation games, and it's a small group. I mean, relative to the size of the industry, but they're very passionate about it, and you find them, and they'll find you, and that's really, like they say, stay in your lane. Do what you do, and find your audience, and then and love them.
Yeah.
So we're going to put Mark on the spot here.
Oh boy.
So you can blame Jason.
Okay.
He says specifically for you.
Okay.
With so many friends in the hobby,
Yeah.
do you find it difficult to tell designers or publishers no when they ask you to preview a new game? And for the others, have you ever pulled back or changed designs based on content provider feedback? So we'll put Mark on the spot
Yeah.
first.
So I mean, Sean can also attest to this, that I'm like, dude, this is bad. It's happened.
I'm like, hey, but I gotta come up here and we gotta do this video. It's not good. Let's not do this week. Think about it. Come back in a month.
Yeah. Okay. So that happens, and I'm not afraid to tell them because I have to present it, right? If I'm going to do it, I have to at least have one thing that I'm excited to talk about. And I mean, there's even been instances with other designers where I just said, I can't do this game for you. I'm sorry. I just can't get behind it in any way. And so they go back and they retool and they bring it. I'm like, okay, now this has some stuff, right? So there is that process, and it's rough because they are friends, and I'm not, but I'm not afraid to say this is bad because, and usually it's not just this is bad, go away. I'm like, but if maybe you did this, this, and this, it might help. And so I always add some, things that I would like to see the game do when I go back to them.
Because it's also very hard when you have forums like BoardGameGeek or Reddit and everything where you have folks that think they know the industry, and again, it's not to bash them, but they're like, oh, he's supporting that game because they paid him to. It's like, no, these guys, they have like Mark and other reviewers like Richard Ham and stuff. They have a choice. If it's bad, they're not doing it. I mean, but if they feel it's good and it needs to get out there, it's good. That we're not a bunch of sellouts. We want to have fun, right? We want to have fun. So for the others, have you ever pulled back or changed designs based on content provider feedback?
Absolutely. Content provider?
Content provider being like playtesters?
Yeah.
I assume that's what he's
Who's a
saying.
content provider? Okay. I'm going to go with playtesters too.
Definitely.
Yeah. We playtest all of our convention scenarios at some of the early events, like January, OrcaCon, stuff like that.
Let's see.
So I spend a lot of time pitching games to publishers. As an independent designer, I'm really at the mercy of the publishers to like a game. And so there might be some games that they're just not loving. But I really appreciate the fact that they tell me why, and they give me ideas, and and I'll really put that away for a month or so, and then go back to it and consider what they're saying doesn't make sense for this game. Like, it's at the end of the day, I still want to love the game, and if what they're suggesting really takes it in completely direction that I don't like, then of course I'm not going to do that. But sometimes they have a suggestion like, oh yeah, that would be so much better, right? And so I definitely will go back to the drawing board and rework it, and then pitch it to them again the next year. So absolutely, especially from game publishers, I'm very open to suggestions.
So we've seen the flood of Kickstarter, but now we're seeing, as you mentioned, the transition of going back to the traditional pre-orders. Like we see Jamie Stegmaier, doing it with Stonemaier Games, and so where do you guys see Kickstarter regarding our industry in 5 years? Do you think it's going to change much from what it is now? Do you think it'll kind of plateau out and lessen, or what?
I think at some point, excuse me, the market's just going to be so saturated with games. I mean, right now we're already kind of feeling it, I think. Where like there's so many games coming out, it's like, how do you keep up when there's 2,000-3,000 games coming out each year? And Kickstarter is really I think the main driving force behind that huge rush. So I don't think we've reached critical mass yet, but I think there's got to be at some point a cap to that, to how far Kickstarter can inject the industry into just overdrive.
Kickstarter's kind of a safety net for us, though, because if Kickstarter projects start failing to fund, that tells us that we're oversaturated on games, that the market hasn't continued to grow with the Kickstarter growth. And while it's really a tough blow for a lot of designers who have spent a lot of design time, at least they're not sunk into printing costs and so on, if that's all stuff that comes after that Kickstarter. So financially, that's kind of saving some people as well. But I agree that Kickstarter takes a large bite, so we're all paying a massive percentage for that insurance.
You wonder if it's eventually going to become a contest of who can put together the best Kickstarter.
Yeah, it already is.
It already is.
But is that much different than a contest to see who can put on the best marketing campaign?
Yep.
For a non-Kickstarter thing.
Yep. So let's switch gears from crowdfunding. We talk about marketing campaign. Come back to social media. How has social media started changing our industry?
I think YouTube's a big one. Just being able to watch somebody play a game that you're interested in buying that's huge. That's something that you couldn't do, 5-10 years ago.
And getting taught how to play,
right?
Like Rodney, right? I mean, teaching videos
awesome.
are huge because so many people, I don't want to read this. Let's find a video.
Right.
I was teaching a bunch of people code names, and I've played it a bajillion times.
Yeah.
And it was one of those. They were all new people who'd never played games before, and so I thought, I'm going to show code names because it's very accessible. And I had this moment of fear because it's an important thing when you teach games to non-gamers. Because if you do it wrong, the experience sucks and they'll never come back.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, I better make sure I get this right. I'm going to flip through the rules or whatever, and I'm looking on my phone, and I was like, wait a minute, and I just Googled Rodney really quick, and I just watched like a 6-minute video from Rodney. And I'm like, oh yeah, thanks Rodney, because it makes sense, right? You just put it out there super easy and like quick memory cues, and I was able to do it. So being able to, it's never been that way for years and years. It was always slugging through the rule book yourself, and I think it's awesome that people can do that now. It is.
What do you feel that could be done more through social media to promote our industry? Whether it's sales, community, whatever.
We build massive communities that are centered around game settings. That's something in a role-playing game will be much more ongoing than a board game. So, and in fact, if you go back and think about old Dungeons & Dragons forums and Forgotten Realms and so on like that, that's really the genesis of social media and gaming anyway. These things go on forever. And that's great because they keep the people involved. But I'd like to hear what you guys want to add for your part of the game industry.
Well, Mark, you're part of the Dice Tout Network. I mean,
it's huge, right? I mean, being part of that network is amazing, and the interaction you get with fans and you get with publishers and designers, and because of that, and even some games when you start talking about them and the narrative comes out in social media, so that draws people in even more. So I think that adds a lot, and especially like in a role-playing situation, it would be interesting to see, how social media can actually play into the game itself, how that might actually, we can play offline a little bit here and then go back to the game. And remember in social media we were doing this thing, and it'd be kind of interesting to do more of that kind of stuff. But I just think how much that social media has just really drawn more people into the game industry in general. It's just huge.
Do you think like when a new game is about to be released or just newly released, and do you think there's like a race amongst like YouTubers to get their content out first, or do you think it's is that there?
Yeah, that is there, especially for the folks who are up and coming in the media, right? They're definitely rushing to get it out first, right? But there is, the interesting thing about Kickstarter videos though is that a lot of campaigns just hit everybody and launch all the videos day one. And I'm still trying to talk folks into, if you've got a 4-week campaign and you have 4 videos, release a video every week, keeping it up in front of people every week, new, fresh content.
Giving them something new to share.
Yes, new to share. I don't understand, and they explained to me that, well, day one we have to hit it. I'm like, I get it, I understand what you're saying, but I think you could have sustained, and I was in marketing for 20 years, you have sustained marketing this way, not just day one or week one for marketing of this campaign.
Because the reality is when you scroll down, you see those 5 or 6 preview videos or reviews, you're going to click the one that you're familiar with the most, your favorite. You're not going to watch the other ones.
I think that's exactly why people want to have them up front. Because if you scroll down and you're a big giant fan of Richard, right? Rahdo runs through. They did a Rahdo. I'm in. Because you like Rahdo's style, or you see Rodney or Game Boy Geek or Mark or one of these people, and you identify with that person, right? Oh, that guy likes a lot of similar things I do, so you click on that review, and you might skip 2 or 3 of the others.
So we're getting close to the end of our time, so we're going to make it a little fun here, thinking outside the box. So
fun.
Yes. If money and intellectual property was not an issue, what is the next game you would either like to publish or design or just see in the market?
Well, I would love to see a Civilization legacy style game in which you start as cavemen and you're working your way up to space age technologies over the course of 12, 14 games.
Oh, wow.
Where they add, and possibly remove some of the basic ones, but we add game mechanics as we go, so that by the time you're playing game 10, you are playing a substantially different game that has been built upon the earlier ones.
That sounds cool.
But that's because that's a bespoke game because you're basically making 13 games.
That's true.
Right. That's exactly right.
It's a cool idea.
I've got some designs.
Anybody else?
I think there's something with conductive ink. Like they can actually print circuit boards on paper now, right? That interact with your phone. Like if there's some way to combine the digital and physicality of board games together, that would be really cool.
That would be really
Because we only have what, like just a handful of app-supported, games, stuff like that.
That's always, I think, money's always the problem with those, right?
Yeah.
Get the app developed is so expensive compared to on the other end.
So, went on BGG and kind of searched for your guys' profiles. I noticed that the majority just have a few games listed in your collections. Does that reflect true, or do you actually have a lot more than what we can find online?
I work for a game company, so I'm not rich. I, on the other hand, come from the tech industry and have a ton of tech friends who are doing quite well. I let them just buy everything. So my game collection is a bookcase.
Nice. I mean, when you have a regular gaming group, I mean, you don't have to worry about bringing games to the table.
Yes, and I buy 2 games a year-ish. I'm contributing. Phew, contributing.
They won't kick you out.
But yeah.
Yeah. I have the opposite problem because I get sent just about everything. And then I have to figure out what's really good enough to keep. Because you can't just hold, and you'll never play it all. I have stuff still in shrink that I want to play. But I try to keep my collection around 300-ish games.
Sorry.
Wait, which
300?
What your online profile says? What, like 42?
42.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're not all listed at all. It's not up to date.
Oh.
But yeah, I've got just over 300 right now. So right.
If there was one game in your personal collection that you would absolutely never part with, what would that game be?
That's tough. Is it I won't part with it because I play it all the time, or I won't part with it just because I
Whatever reason.
It doesn't matter. I won a set of Acquire at Gen Con back in 2005.
Yeah.
I played in an Acquire tournament and actually didn't make it to the finals, but I was an alternate and then somebody didn't make it. So I got lucky and got in. And they gave everybody like this solid cherry wood hand-carved board for Acquire, and all the buildings were wood, and all the cards were gold stamped because it was WotC back then. And they were all numbered and stuff. And Acquire is such a great game anyway, but that's something I would do.
For me, it might be Splendor, just because it's like one of the only games my wife will play with me. So if I want to play with my wife, I gotta play Splendor.
Eclipse, Story Eclipse.
Oh.
There's a new edition coming out with some changes, and we will play it. But I love original Eclipse. So the national champion for many years at Gen Con is an associate of our gaming group. So we get our pants handed to us as he warms up to do the next year's Eclipse tournament.
Keith, Sam, what about you?
I would say probably for me it's probably an old Parker Brothers game from the 70s called Dealer's Choice. There's a lot of sentimental value, but it's also was kind of from the classic era of board games. When we were kids, we didn't have anything else to do but play board games. There was no cable TV and stuff like that. Sounding like an old guy now, which I guess I am. But it's a great game which involves really no luck. It's all negotiation, and it was very clever. Where you're buying and selling used cars and sabotaging each other's lots. And there's a lot of thinking, double thinking. It's obviously been out of print for many years, so we do get it out. In fact, we played it a couple weeks ago. We do play it from time to time, and just for the sentimental value on it and for what it represents, that'd probably be the game that I would want to part with.
It's a tough one for me. We've got a copy of Mechs and Minions, the League of Legends board game, that, from what I understand, is pretty scarce these days. And it's super fun, and if you're a fan of League of Legends, it's fun to just look at the little miniatures and the huge figure that they ship with it and all the cool stuff. So
Everything about that game is amazing.
That was my first endeavor to painting miniatures. Yeah. What about you, Mark?
Oh, so for current games that I just have and I love, it would be a real toss-up between like Zaya and Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition. But really, the one game that I just would not ever get rid of would be probably the very first game I ever purchased with my own money. It was in the middle of one of the magazines back in the day. Bought it like A&A Hobbies, Awful Green Things from Outer Space. Not that the game is any good, but it was just, especially now. I mean, back then we loved it, but I bought this game with my own money my first time, and it was just one of those memorable moments. And then I have like the red boxed edition of like Dungeons and Dragons that I just wouldn't get rid of, right? So those are just memory-related games that I just hold on to. So.
I'm fond of my copy of Boot Hill.
Oh yeah, Boot Hill
Yeah,
for sure.
right.
Have played it? No, I haven't played it in decades.
20 years,
Yeah.
right?
Well, thank you all for joining us today. Were you entertained? Did you learn something new? Give our panel folks a round of applause. Thank you very much for taking your time out of your schedule. We've come to the end of that. And everyone, enjoy your con. Gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for coming.